Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I say, it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely winter. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I said, it's alright. Little darling, I feel that ice is slowly melting. Little darling, it seems like years since it's been clear. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I said, it's alright. Sun, sun, here he comes. Sun, 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 here he comes. Little darling, the smiles returning to their faces. Little darling, it feels like years since it's been here. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I said, it's alright. Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun, I say, it's alright. It's alright. It's alright.
This is a new day. This is a new day full of sound and light and expectation. This day has been waiting for you. This day has been waiting especially for you, to embrace you, to guide you. This day has been waiting with open arms just for you. This is the day we have been given. Let's not waste it. Come now, and let us worship together. Good morning, everybody. My name is Reverend Joseph Boyd, and I am welcoming you live here at 1105 Elm Street in one of the best cities in the world, Youngstown, Ohio. It's been an incredible week in the life of this country. A very painful week and confusing. And it is so good to be here with you. It's so good to be back here in the pulpit. It's very good to see your smiling and even sleepy faces on Zoom. And I feel very fortunate to be here with you all. You know, we are worshiping on the land of the Erie and the Osage. We are worshiping on land where English immigrants came, bringing their faith, a faith guided by reason and tolerance and justice. For over a century, we have been worshiping on this land, in this space, standing in solidarity with the marginalized. And due to the pandemic in March of 2020, we now have carried that message beyond the borders of this physical space, and now can bring it to you, to your homes, wherever you happen to be. So I welcome all our friends and members who know us in person locally, all our members and friends in Youngstown, Ohio, Mahoning and Trumbull County, all those who made the drive from parts of PA, Meadville and Hermitage, and even further out. And I also welcome all those who are just getting to know us through this virtual platform. I welcome you if you happen to be in states ranging from California to South Carolina to New York. And I also welcome all our international friends, those who might be joining us this morning or viewing our YouTube later in the afternoon, whenever you'd like. Some of those people are coming in from Brazil, the Dominican Republic, Europe, and other places. So my hope is that this service may give you a bit of a buoy and a bit of a context for engaging this time. And during the sermon today, I'll be talking a bit about the events this past week, and I welcome your responses during the talkback. But I also want to let you know that we offer so much more than even just Sunday morning services, which you are welcome to join in on this Zoom link. For instance, this coming Tuesday at 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to be hosting a panel discussion on poverty in the Mahoning Valley, which is where Youngstown is, and responses to poverty from various faith communities. And so you can join me. I'll be one of the panel facilitators, and it's 9:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time this Tuesday. You're also welcome to join us if you are very curious about wanting to participate in worship. You may notice that it's not just me who leads worship. It's a team effort with many of the members of this congregation. And I invite you to join me in talking about next month's theme, which aptly is Beloved Community. What does it mean to be a people that is beloved? And how do we nurture beloved community? Couldn't be more apt to the time that we are in. So you're welcome to join me. Again, that Worship Associates meeting is going to be Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, this coming Wednesday. And it's open to all of you who want to come and offer your thoughts and your inspiration. And also on Friday, January 15th at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we are going to have a very lively conversation on learning from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. We're going to be talking about some of his ideas and where do we go from here, chaos or community, and applying it to the integration of issues of racism and poverty, and specifically how it relates to our school system. And that is our national school system as well as our local school system here in Youngstown. How do these ideas and dreams and actions, nonviolent actions, inform how we might live into the 21st century? So you're welcome to join us. That's going to be Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to have a range of speakers ranging from leaders of the NAACP in Ohio to various other community leaders who are going to be joining us for that conversation. And last but not least, I welcome you next Sunday. It's going to be Martin Luther King Jr. Sunday, where we're going to be talking about Dr. King's message of love in a time of hatred and violence. And afterward, we're going to have our annual meeting. It'll be a very important historic meeting at this church and in this nation. We're going to be voting on whether to accept the eighth principle, which is the principle of dismantling racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. So please join us. It'll be a historic meeting and a historic vote, especially if you are a member who's been a member for 60 days. You're welcome to vote and offer your voice to that conversation. And now I'd like to go to Sue Angelotti, who will offer our chalice lighting this morning.
Good morning. The events of Wednesday have left me shaken, as it probably has all of us. Things I thought were safe are not safe at all. It seemed democracy was permanent. It seemed we were on a good path toward equality between Black and white people. It seemed the gun-toting racist insurrectionists could be contained. All of these assumptions were brought into question Wednesday when our president encouraged a mob to storm the Capitol. Leadership matters. It will be some time before we know the fallout from these events, but on a personal level, I'm going to try to listen to people a little more when they spout misinformation and try to take it more seriously. I'm not sure where this will lead, though, because if people completely disbelieve facts, it is hard to know where to start. I light this chalice with all these confusing thoughts in my mind.
Let us now join together and say the covenant of this church. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Each month, we give to an organization that supports transformation in our community, which is the heart of our mission. In our church's historic commitment to the well-being of our community, we give 100% of our offering to those in need. UUYO's Give Away the Plate recipient for January 2020 and 21 is UUJO, UU Justice, Ohio. They are a group of clergy and lay leaders throughout Ohio, offering congregations access to advocacy, training, and action around issues of social equality and equity. This year, UUJO has been critical in offering expertise and materials to the local important immigrant assistance program that our members run. This month's Share the Plate will pay for our membership in UUJO. We will now receive the offering that supports the life of Youngstown, the Mahoning Valley, and our wider world.
Make channels for the streams of love, where they may broadly run, and love has overflowing streams to fill them everyone. But if at any time we seize such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be patched and for we must share if we would keep this gift all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love.
Please join me in a time of presence with each other. Wherever you happen to be, even if you're walking around or if you're lying down or sitting, just take some time to notice your breath. You know, I know a number of people have experienced loss of a loved one this past week. I actually just received 2 phone calls this morning from 2 separate families that lost somebody. So I ask that we offer our presence to those who are feeling a sense of loss, and also those who are feeling afraid and confused, which are many people. Let's just offer our silent presence for a few moments.
Our reading today is an excerpt from Return to Tapasa by Albert Camus. While watching it, I finally got through the barbed wire and found myself among the ruins. And under the glorious December light, as happens but once or twice in lives which ever after can consider themselves favored to the full, I found exactly what I had come seeking, what, despite the era and the world, was offered me, truly to me alone in that forsaken nature. From the forum strewn with olives could be seen the village down below. No sound came from it. Wisps of smoke rose in the limpid air. The sea likewise was silent, as if smothered under the unbroken shower of dazzling cold light. From the Chenoa, a distant cock's crow alone celebrated the day's fragile glory. In the direction of the ruins, as far as the eye could see, there was nothing but pock-marked stones and wormwood, trees and perfect columns in the transparency of the crystalline air. It seemed as if the morning were stabilized. The sun stopped for an incalculable moment. In this light and this silence, years of wrath and might and night melted slowly away. I listened to an almost forgotten sound within myself, as if my heart, long stopped, were calmly beginning to beat again. And awake now, I recognize one by one the imperceptible sounds of which the silence was made up, the figured bass of the birds, the sea's faint, brief sighs at the foot of the rocks, the vibration of the trees, the blind singing of the columns, the rustling of the wormwood plants, the furtive lizards. I heard that. I also listened to the happy torrents rising within me. It seemed to me that I had at last come to harbor, for a moment at least, and that henceforth that moment would be endless. But soon after, the sun rose visibly a degree in the sky. A magpie preluded briefly, and at once from all directions, bird songs burst out with energy, jubilation, joyful discordance, and infinite rapture. The day started up again. It was to carry me to evening. At noon on the half sandy slopes covered with heliotropes, like a foam left by the furious waves of the last few days as they withdrew, I watched the sea barely swelling at that hour with an exhausted motion, and I satisfied the two thirsts one cannot long neglect without drying up. I mean loving and admiring. For there is merely bad luck in not being loved. There is misfortune in not loving. All of us today are dying of this misfortune, for violence and hatred dry up the heart itself. The long fight for justice exhausts the love that nevertheless gave birth to it. In the clamor in which we live, love is impossible and justice does not suffice. This is why Europe hates daylight and is only able to set injustice up against injustice. But in order to keep justice from shriveling up like a beautiful orange fruit containing nothing but bitter, dry pulp, I discovered once more at Tapasa that one must keep intact in oneself a freshness, a cool wellspring of joy. Love the day that escapes injustice and return to combat having won that light. Here I recaptured the former beauty, a young sky, and I measured my luck, realizing at last that in the worst years of our madness, the memory of that sky never left me. This was what in the end had kept me from despairing. I had always known that the ruins of Tapasa were younger than our new constructions on our bomb damage. There the world began over again every day in an ever new light. Oh, light. This is the cry of all the characters of ancient drama brought face to face with their fate. This last resort was ours too, and I knew it now. In the middle of winter, I at last discovered that there was in me an invincible summer.
Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. Nothing is real, and nothing to get hung about. Strawberry fields forever. Living is easy with eyes closed. Misunderstanding all you see. It's getting hard to be someone, but it all works out. Doesn't matter much to me. Let me it must be high or low. That is, you know you can't tune in, but it's alright. That is, I think it's not too bad. Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. Nothing is real, and nothing to get hung about. Strawberry fields forever. Always know, sometimes think it's me, but you know I know when it's a dream. I think a no might mean a yes, but it's all wrong. That is, I think I disagree. Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to strawberry fields. Nothing is real, and nothing to get hung about. Strawberry fields forever. Strawberry fields forever. Strawberry fields forever.
Wednesday was a big day for our country. Quite an understatement, really. At Union Seminary in New York City, many alumnus were celebrating with one of their own alumni, Reverend Dr. Raphael Warnock, who was voted as the first black senator in the state of Georgia. Dr. Warnock is senior minister of Ebenezer Baptist Church, which is where Martin Luther King Jr. served, and he's carried forth that legacy of nonviolence. Many were also forced to take notice on Wednesday due to black and brown voters that John Ossoff was also voted in the Senate and elected as a member of the Democratic Party. It continues to amaze and humble me to see, especially those on the margins, black and brown voters actively participating in a system that has consistently tried and failed to dehumanize them. We also saw on Wednesday the storming of the Capitol building by an armed, angry mob who forced their way with seeming little resistance and did what they could to destroy and desecrate the center and symbol of our democracy. Though dramatic, this also failed, and many black and brown workers at the Capitol cleaned up the mess afterward with respect and dignity. On Wednesday evening, we had a gathering of congregants to process what had just happened that afternoon and process this moment in our country's history. Many, like myself, were shocked and horrified. Many also, like myself, were seeking to ground this moment in the values of this church, the values of democracy, the value of justice, and the value of celebrating our diversity as a community, as a nation. In the days since that attack on Wednesday, many organizations have released some kind of statement And many have denounced the act as white terrorism, calling for the impeachment of our current president, and again, highlighting the very clear disparity of policing that we witness based on race in this country. I heard one tweet that succinctly put it well, I thought. It was from Devonte Harris. "We're not asking you to shoot them like you shoot us. We're asking you to not shoot us like you don't shoot them." Pretty well put, I thought. Sadly, though, there were some deaths that did occur. Last I checked, there were 4 who were killed and at least 1 police officer, and harm was done. And the reverberations of this harm can be felt throughout our entire country. And many of you probably are feeling that in some way, even today, but especially on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. I know I did. Members of the Standing Rock Sioux tribe issued a statement remarking on remembering the past protests at Standing Rock for halting a pipeline. And they remembered carrying signs which read, "We are unarmed. We are unarmed." And the memory of still being met with violent force, hurt, and death. Many more deaths than what occurred at the Capitol this past Wednesday. I have read statements released that have responded to the outcry that this is not what our country does, with the other response saying that we need to come to terms that this actually is what our country does and has done for far too long. Acts of violence and harm for those seeking civil rights, and leniency toward those who show up armed and white, wishing and causing destruction. Ivan Klima, the Czech author, once said that it is easier to destroy than to create. I think this depends on how you define the word easy. I don't think it's easy to live with the aftermath of destruction, to rage against it, to process it, to live with it and try to integrate it into your life and into your values. I don't think this is easy. I don't think it's easy to see many of our citizens, regardless of party affiliation, visibly shaken, upset, and horrified. But on the other hand, I think this is a sign of hope. It is a hopeful sign that so many have denounced this act as not who we want to be, even though this act represents over 400 years of such acts. This might not be an aberration, but it's not who we want to be any longer. Finding that tipping point, whatever that is, I think is really significant and really important. This may be a continuation of who we've been as a violent and unjust country for far too long, but this is not really who we want to be anymore. Finding that tipping point, I think, is really, really important. I think it is actually easier to create than it is to destroy. In the long term, it's easier. Because to create is to be human. And thus to create is to remember who we are. It is easier in some ways to be human, to be who we are, than it is to get caught up in a frenzy of destruction that leads to and results from hurt and being full of hatred, leaving you completely out of control. Even our response to hatred can be more hatred if we don't take the time to remember who we really are. Creators, people who can create rather than destroy. Often I think we can mistake creation for being a very difficult thing because we assume that we are creating something that has never been there before. We may think that we're starting from scratch in some ways. And so thus to create is to go against the grain of our circumstances, against the grain of what we see and what we read on TV and in the news. But thanks to Camus, I see it differently. Camus fought against injustice his entire life. He was born in France. He was there when the Nazis occupied France, and he participated in the underground resistance during that time. When France was again ruled by its own government, Camus was horrified to see how brutal the government was treating Algerians, in much the same way we are horrified to see the acts of our own government today. Tapasa was a childhood spot where Camus had fond memories of enjoying the summertime as a carefree youth. When he returned as an adult to this area, the area was completely wrapped in fencing by the French government, and it was inaccessible to him. This moment triggered in him all that he had witnessed over the last 20 years of his life: brutality and cruelty by the French government, hatred, and rampant injustice. He found he was personally getting very tired of fighting the same fight over and over and over again with not much progress. He was getting tired of fighting injustice, and his work was beginning to feel very dry and bitter. He could feel hatred beginning to grow in his heart. And when he saw the fencing around Tapasa, he felt that the joy that he once experienced as a kid was gone forever. And he left in despair when he saw that. I know many of us might be feeling like that at this moment. It can feel at times like the pain and injustice in this world is just too much, and the cards are just stacked against us, no matter how much we resist and how much we do. But that wasn't the last time he visited Tapasa. He came actually a few years after that moment. And at that moment, he had a startling revelation, some of what Jim read in the piece earlier. The fence actually was still there in the same way he remembered the second time. He still couldn't access it. He couldn't get to it. But this time he did something different, which he didn't do the second time. Instead of just looking at the fence, which for him triggered his despair, he looked up. And he saw the sky. And when he saw the sky, something remarkable happened. He came to an immediate and startling revelation. His childhood summertime was right there in that moment, right where he was. Everything that he loved, and everyone he loved, and everyone who loved him was right there in that moment, with him always, no matter what. And that's when he wrote the famous line, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer." The context of this line is the depth of winter was seeing the fencing around his childhood playground, the place that he found joy. The winter was also the many decades of brutality of the French government toward the Algerian people. And even before then, the Nazis who occupied France. That was the winter. The invincible summer was everything that he loved, and everyone who loved him, all right there, in the depth of winter, with him, always. Much like the Buddha who looked up and saw the morning star, Camus was able to find the source of his life, what he loved, and who he loved, and who loved him. All right there, in that moment. What's impressive to me is Camus took that experience and he went back to doing what he was doing. He went back to acting in solidarity with the Algerians in France who were continually brutalized and needed solidarity and support. But this was different for him, he said. He kept alive his awareness of an invincible summer, a childhood joy that was not in the past, but was here in this moment, in the present, a living present. He wrote, this work for justice could be nourished by what he loved and who he loved throughout his entire life, and it could be there with him to support him. It would never leave him. And this made his acts of resistance a joy, an expression of love, part of his love. He was saved from having to be bitter and hard and despairing. I don't know if John Lennon ever knew or read Camus, but it's interesting that he actually had a similar experience to Camus. After both his mother and his father had died when John Lennon was quite young, Lennon became familiar with a Salvation Army children's home in Liverpool. And in the back of this children's home, they had this place called Strawberry Field. It was just a very small garden where he used to play as a kid. As an adult, as a member of the Beatles, he wrote the famous song that Jeff played beautifully, Strawberry Fields Forever, a way of remembering what gave him joy as a boy and continued to give him joy forever, even though as an adult that joy became muddled with all different kinds of experiences. The great writer Toni Morrison said of her vocation that all writing is remembering, and when we remember, we create. I love that. When we remember, we create. I would say that is all of us right now. All of us who have the opportunity to live a life well lived. We can remember. We remember who we are. And this act of remembering is not recapturing a moment from our past. It's not remembering who we are based on our quote-unquote history. Remembering is an act of creation. Remembering is creating who we are in the present and who we want to be. So who are we? Well, it's tempting to look back at 400 years plus of brutality and conclude that we are all a nation of brutes, hopelessly lost, and utterly unredeemable. But I don't think that's too creative, personally. Maybe it's easy, and yet it creates a hard and bitter life, I think, when you choose to live that way. I'm reminded of who I am each and every Sunday that I'm in the pulpit with you. I'm reminded that I'm part of a community that seeks the truth in love and seeks to serve with kindness and integrity. I'm part of a community that knows how to laugh and have fun. Humor is super important, and I've actually learned this from all of you. I've learned that not knowing what to do or how to respond in a given moment is actually a virtue. It makes us better listeners and helps us to respond more skillfully. I've learned that compassion is real, and no matter how bad my situation is, there is someone here who will be there for me, to support me as I go through it. I've learned that it's a great pleasure to be able to be myself. And myself is not just someone from the past, but myself is someone I am choosing to create with all of you in this moment through remembering. I've learned that it is possible to be aware of and engage with difficulty without growing bitter and despairing. I've learned during this pandemic that I really like breathing, and I never really paid much attention to my breathing. I like being alive, and I like being in the life that I'm in. I like Youngstown, and I like this church very much. I like who I'm becoming, thanks to all of you. More and more, I feel like I'm coming in touch with my center, my own invincible summer. Invincible means nothing can harm it or stop it, including death. Perhaps this is what we leave ultimately whenever we pass. We pass on what we love, and we pass on who we love. And the next generation gets to embody that in their own way by remembering that which is invincible. I feel I've inherited through reading Camus a love for the Algerians in France and their plight. I have inherited a respect and attention for the marginal and the harmed within my own country, the United States, in my own time and place. I've learned that joy and love can inform my life rather than just react to horror with despair and bitterness forever. I've learned that service can be an act of love rather than mere duty or responsibility. It helps me to remember who I am. So, who are you? Next week, we'll be given the opportunity to vote after service during the annual meeting on a principle to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and our institutions. It couldn't be more apt timing. I hope you will join me and us for that. Each of our actions, rightly understood, is an act of imagination. When we respond to violence with a commitment to community, when we respond to bias and prejudice with a commitment to greater equity, we are given the opportunity to remember who we are. Not who we've been, but who we want to be right now, in this moment, in the present. We are so fortunate, you and I, to be alive during this time. Our life is precious and vulnerable, and we are living through precious and very vulnerable times. We are all given the opportunity to practice really caring for each other, not just in words, but in our actions, in how we choose to live our daily life. It is a precious and rare opportunity. We've been given the gift on this day to respond to hatred and fear with their antidotes, understanding, and committed actions of peace and justice, and true community. we are given the opportunity on this day to hear from many voices about how we might discover the joy of our own humanity in the midst of horror. We are given the opportunity to come in contact with an invincible summer in the depth of winter. My prayer is this: let's not waste this opportunity, friends. Let's not waste it. Please pray with me. Spirit of love, we are grateful for the gift of breath. We are grateful for the gift of a community like this that seeks the truth in love and understands the power of kindness, humor, beauty, and joy. On this day, please help us to find comfort if we are hurting. If we are comfortable, please help us to comfort the hurting. On this day, may we find out who we really are, which is a creation of who we want to be in this moment, with the support of others. All this we pray. Amen.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. No hell below us, above us only sky. Imagine all the people living for today. Imagine there's no countries. It isn't hard to do. Nothing to kill or die for, and no religion too. Imagine all the people living life in peace. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will be as one. Imagine no possessions. I wonder if you can. No need for greed or hunger. A brotherhood of man. Imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one.
We extinguish the flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we keep in our hearts until we meet again.
As you depart, please remember the one great fact. You are loved and never truly alone.
When I was growing up, my best friend was a unicorn. The others smiled at me and called me crazy. But I was not upset, for long ago I found the key. I've always known their seeing must be hazy. The unicorn and I, we while away the hours, singing, dancing, and romancing in the wildflowers. And we'd sing, seeing is believing in the things you see. Loving is believing in the ones you love. Seeing is believing in the things you see. Loving is believing in the ones you love. When I was 17, my best friend was the Northern Star. The others asked why I was always dreaming. But I was not upset, for long ago I found the key away from daily hurts and plans and scheming. The Northern Star and I would share our dreams together, laughing, sighing, sometimes crying in all kinds of weather. And we'd sing, seeing is believing in the things you see. Loving is believing in the ones you love. Seeing is believing in the things you see. Loving is believing in the ones you love. And now that I am grown, my best friend lives inside of me. The others smile at me and call me crazy. But I am not upset, for long ago I found the key. I've always known their seeing must be hazy. My friend and I, we while away the hours, playing, dancing, and romancing in the wildflowers. And we sing, seeing is believing in the things you see. Loving is believing in the ones you love. Seeing is believing in the things you see. Loving is believing